Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Humanity 101's inaugural discussion. This is actually the first to 6 discussions during this series over the course of this next year. Before we get started, I actually just wanted to kind of talk to you guys about what Humanity 101 is, what the purpose of it is, why we wanted to do this discussion series, and then what it is that we want everyone to really be able to take away from the discussion. So we realized that Dallas doesn't really have anything similar to this discussion. There are some different speaking events and some discussion series, but none that are really tailored toward making people feel comfortable and having a safe environment to discuss certain topics that we all really want to talk about and we want to hear things about and we want to learn about, but we're not always comfortable doing so. So that's kind of the purpose of this. That's what we wanted to do, is create a safe space, a safe environment for everyone to feel comfortable learning, listen to the discussion on the stage, and have a discussion back and forth between everybody. And so here we are. This is Thomas Massaquoi. He is the co-executive producer of the series. He is a visual artist, filmmaker, and author. And then our guest speaker today is Ashley Berges. She is also an author. She is a television and film. She's a television and TV host and radio host, and she has also had books. She does a wide variety of things, so please welcome both of them to the discussion.
Is this on? Oh, I think it is. Is it hot? Okay, we're good. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Great. Awesome. So we'd like to thank Gage. Gage didn't introduce himself. Did Gage introduce himself? I don't think he did. So that's Gage with the Steve Jobs look, and he's also a co-founder and my business partner in this, and it was a brainchild of both of ours, and we decided that we wanted to take the next step forward and really engage in the community. Our goal is to just continue these discussion series and lectures and partnering up with people throughout the community and abroad and recording these types of discussions and offering content that people can feel inspired, informed, and educated. So the topic today is called Why Are You Still Single? Now, most people feel, oh, this is for people that are, bachelor and bachelorettes, or, the whole point about it, or this topic, is addressing how social media apps have impacted people that not only are in, relationships or single, but discussing the dynamics of those and how, or ways to work around it or to solve it or to engage it. So we're going to, over the next hour, discuss relationships, and we're going to get some questions from you guys too, if you have any. And hopefully everybody can walk away learning something. So first I'd like to know from you, Ashley, is it true that people are still single? Are a lot of people still single? Is it an opinion, or is it a fact that in this day and age with social media that you find that more people are leaning towards the single life or still trying to engage in what people would consider love?
That's a good question. I think that, obviously with technology, I think it's predicating the situation where people seem to be, maybe there's more people that are single at this moment. I think a lot of times too, back in the day when you dated somebody, right? You dated someone and there wasn't dating apps and there wasn't social media and there wasn't all this preemptive, let me know everything about you before we even go on a date.
Correct.
And I think that in this culture that we're in, it takes away the fun mystery, and it takes away the challenge of getting to know somebody. And it's like you already know them, and then people make a decision immediately if they decide that they want to continue this relationship. And I just feel like in the technology and in this age, sometimes we put the cart in front of the horse. And so I think a lot of people might be single out of technology reasons. But I also think we know it more because on social media, we know who's single and who's not, who's in a complicated relationship, who's not. And so I think it's more out there, and I think it's more publicly known as well.
Do you think that apps are working for people right now, or do you think that the traditional way of finding relationships or engaging dating is better? Which one would you say has been, because I know from not just personal experience, but I think also with observational. I think a lot of people have this pre-notion when they do online dating, like it's like fast food. And they are looking at all these different check marks and they're saying, oh, you have this. You're like the number one, swipe right or swipe left. But then they want everything to come out hot and ready. They want their relationships to be hot and ready, just like they want jobs and income and all these things. We're in what I call the fast food generation. So when you have that mindset with everything else that's in front of you, do you think that it's a good mindset to go in with the app age, or do you think it's even working in that way for people?
Well, let me start real quick because I don't want anybody to say, oh gosh, she was down on, all the apps. I have been to 3 weddings now that people have met each other on dating apps. Okay, so I've been to 3 weddings. I've been to a lot of weddings.
Yeah.
I've been to 3.
Same.
And they're still together.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that being said, I do believe that it does work. But one of the things that I'd like to challenge us to think about is, isn't it better to sometimes go where we want to be at, to do what we want to do, and then to meet somebody that's doing the stuff that we're doing that we actually like to do? I mean, to me, it's like if I like to go to a basketball game, let's say I like basketball, and I go to basketball games, and maybe I go and watch the basketball game at some bar, and there's a group of people that actually follow the team that I follow, let's just say. Mm-hmm. And I go to that bar, and I hang out, and I meet people that actually follow that team. Or maybe I like to go sailing, and I hang out at, White Rock Lake, and I go to like a sailing club, and I get to meet people that actually do what I like to do. Yeah. I think that's something to be thought about.
Yeah.
But I do think that some of us work jobs that we're surrounded by people we're not that interested in. We don't want to have a romance at work. We work such long hours that it's hard to go out and find something to actually do what we like to do. And so I think that's when the dating app comes into play. But I do think that sometimes we got to have like old school ways of doing things and not just resort to one thing or another.
Because I think, and I agree with what you're saying. I go into it with the mentality of what I told people is that when you meet someone on an app, it's like meeting someone in a bar. And you can't, I call it the first 48. So it's like if you meet someone online, I'm not saying you have to meet within 48 hours, but at least set up a meeting within 48 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you're trying to negotiate, like you're trying to do a treaty over the next 7 days, it's not even worth going on a date with anybody. Because people sit there and say, oh, I'll just wait about 3, 4, 5 days. I'm like, no, it's like a bar type situation. Like you eventually have to step out of the bar and go meet the person. But I think if you're trying to parlay a meetup, I'm like, it's not even worth it. So do you feel that there has to be some point of authenticity in the layout of any person that is trying to portray themselves in social media? Because I think with a lot of people, the problem is that they're trying to show the best parts of them. And we are afraid, I think initially, and I think that happens even without the apps being considered, that we want to show the best parts. They call it the honeymoon stage for a lot of people, where they're just like, oh, I'm not going to take a shit in front of my partner the first week. I can say shit, right? Because nobody's going to censor us. Yeah, they're talking about I don't want to shit, I don't want to fart, I don't want to eat a certain way, in front of my partner. I'm only going to take a little nibble. I'm not going to gorge. No, I don't want to do the buffet. But you low-key do want to do the buffet, So it's one of those things that you feel like authenticity. Do you feel like there could be a problem if somebody's trying to be too authentic? Or do you think there's a little bit of a measuring
There's
point?
got to be a buffer zone, I mean, there is a way that you have to be authentic, and I agree. And pooping and all that stuff is not good on the first few dates. I mean, you want to try to go at least a year into that relationship with probably not hearing those sounds and maybe going into the other restroom. I'm a big believer in a little bit of mystery is good on that.
I agree too.
Because it can prolong a relationship for a very long time.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually it all hangs out, right?
Yeah.
Eventually there comes a time where you just don't hide anything. But I do think a sense of authenticity is really good, but I think there's a level of it, and I think in social media you're right. You show like the best sides of yourself, like look at me, and it's like you took that picture, took like 50 times, and you put the filters on and this and that. But it's like showing yourself at some point in social media is important, but I think that's the time when we have to be right with when we're looking for somebody, that we're not looking for someone that's all put together, that we're not looking for someone that's perfect in the pictures.
Agreed.
And that we can actually be honest too and say, you know what, they're projecting themselves that way because I'm doing the same thing, because I'm looking for somebody too, and I want somebody to see the best side of me. And I think when we get real with ourselves, that's when we get real with the plight of the other person and realize, you know what, they're not perfect, neither am I, but gosh darn it, I like them. Let's see where it goes.
Correct, because I think if you find everything out about the person, it makes the relationship sort of bland at that point.
It's like, boring.
It is, right? It's just like you don't want someone...
You already know them. You already read the book. Why are you going to buy the book? You know,
Yeah.
why are you going to buy the movie? You know, you can just rent it on Netflix. And
That's why people don't enjoy fast food anymore as much anymore. That's what they try to be bougie with, like, you know, high-end restaurants, because you've already had McDonald's over and
trying
over.
to bring it back, right?
And
bring
over
it back
again.
fast food.
Yeah, but I mean, we're currently in a fast food era, so I don't eat fast food like that all the time. You know, I have a very, distinguished palate. But, yes, we do jokes here too. Believing that with the authenticity, what do you think people are, because we've talked about that already, but what do you think people are getting wrong about the current era that we're in? What are things that people are missing? Where do you think people are having their shortcomings at?
You know,
the majority.
That's a great question. I don't know if it's changed. You know, I think that we're all the same people. We just have technology. But I think most of us really... I think maybe a little backstory because, you know, why the hell should I be talking about this, right? You know, I am a therapist. I am a licensed therapist. I'm a counselor. I'm also a life coach. But I have lived my life a certain way. And I remember the last time I got engaged, I gave back the last ring and I moved out. And I couldn't stand this person. God bless him. Okay? But... I moved out and I moved into my own place and I realized that the same thing was wrong in every relationship. The relationship was wrong, but the other thing that was in the relationship was also me. So it's not always them. It was also me. And so I realized that I had to take time off in my life, and I literally took 1 year off. And I'm not telling everybody to take a year off. Don't freak out. Don't gasp. Okay, because I know some of my clients go, oh my God, you're not forcing that on me. I'm like, no. But I took a year off, and I actually got to know who I was.
Yeah.
Because I really didn't genuinely understand who I was. And I really defined myself and my value based on who I was dating or based on what I was doing, not on who I was at the core. And I didn't know who I was at the core. And so it took me a while to find that. And I had to figure out how to create boundaries in my life because I let people do whatever because I didn't want them walking out of my life, right? Because I figured if you let people do things, even though they piss you off, they're still going to be there. But the problem is that doesn't work either because we have resentment, right?
Yep.
And then I realized that I had to deal with myself as an individual, but I had to figure out what was my values and what was at my core and who am I to unconditionally love myself because I think many of us know this, and I learned it so well. When we're with somebody, we have a tendency of loving ourselves because we're with them.
Yeah.
Or we love because they make us feel good and they love us. But guess what happens when they leave? Or when we leave, we lose that, and so that love is broken, right? But we don't have the love inside of us to fill the well. And so that's where I think a lot of us are at, and I think back in the 1800s that was still happening, in the 1950s it was happening, now in the 1700s it was happening. Nothing's changed, and I think that's where we are right now. We're in the same place, and we don't know how to love ourselves because we've been told that in order to have love, somebody else has to love you. And that's just not it. That's not the core of the issue. We got to love ourselves first before somebody can come in and love us. And we have to unconditionally understand how to love ourselves unconditionally and then unconditionally love other people. Because if we don't understand that, we have conditional love. And I think many of us were raised in conditional love patterns, right?
Yeah.
Where we were loved because we got good grades, right? Or we were loved because we played football and we did good. Or we were a cheerleader or whatever. I mean, I was not a cheerleader. But, you had those cheerleaders, too, that did all that great stuff. And their parents loved them. But right when they did something bad, they weren't loved, quote unquote, anymore.
Yeah. And I think the common thing that people miss out with love, or they get confused with love, is they interchange the characteristics of favoritism with love. So people say, oh, I love you, but they don't apply the same rules to all the people that they say they love each other to. So like you say, oh, I love my mom, I love my brother, I love my friends, but then to an extent each person and to what you can tolerate and what you don't want to tolerate. I think, like you said earlier, in terms of your personal experience, I think it takes a little bit of maturity to admit the shortcomings of what you brought in to the breakdown of your relationship. A lot of people don't normally take a step back and sit there and say, what did I do, or what's the consistent pattern that I'm finding when I'm in a relationship with someone and we come to the same end game. And a lot of times they're like, oh, well, that person, they were wrong and they didn't listen, they didn't apply the rules. And sometimes when I'm hearing these stories, I'm like, but you always continue to get the same results with all these different people. So have you ever sat back and for a brief moment acknowledge the fact of what are you messing up on?
And I agree with what you're saying, and I think that's interesting. I mean, one of the things that I realized is I had dated some really great people, and I was in really great relationship with some great people, but I always found fault in stuff that they did. And I don't know if any of y'all been there, but literally it's like the way they throw something on the floor or they don't pick up something, it becomes this huge deal.
And the sad part about that is that we will let our friends get away with the same behavior that we are hating on that person for, but not give them that same courtesy. We all have a friend that doesn't call us back. We let them make it. We have a friend that blows up our phone all the time. We let them make it. We have a friend that may ghost us every once in a while. We let them make it. But that one person you start dating, they start showing a little bit, oh, I've never seen this ever in my life before. Oh, this person is never like this before. I swear to God, I'm never going to date a person like that again. But you have like 6 or 7 friends in your phone that have those same characteristics. You know, this person's a little shady. I don't really know about that person. We all have a shady friend.
I think everybody does.
Everybody has that one shady friend, and you're like, but I love Susie, but I love Scott. But everybody's like, are you really in love with that person, or are they kind of, you know, someone that you shouldn't be around? That brings me back to the next thing that I was going to talk about is community. The tribe, the people that I call it the tribe, or the people you surround yourself with. Do your friends have a heavy impact on the trajectory of you finding love or the success of your relationships? Would you say that they have any type of influence on that?
Yes. I mean, most people don't see a therapist. Most people ask their friends, right? What do you think about him? What do you think about her? What do you think about him? Mm-hmm. And what your friends say directly correlates to your thoughts because you're like, oh, really? Because if somebody says something negative, really?
Yeah.
Oh, and all of a sudden it starts getting into your head and you start thinking about it.
Yeah.
And you're like, maybe they're not that good looking. Maybe they're not that smart. I don't know. And all those thoughts, oh, you remember when he did that thing to you or she did that thing to you and you got all upset?
Yeah.
And then it becomes this huge scenario. And then you start devaluing the relationship, right? And so we start devaluing it. But we're not really looking at the advice that we're giving and what the advice that we're getting, because where is it coming from?
Yeah.
We love our friends, but some of our friends haven't been in a good relationship. Some of our friends might not even want us in a relationship.
True.
And so we're getting information from them, and then it's like kind of setting us off into a different course of, well, I don't know, and you start questioning the relationship from the inside out.
They project sometimes, or we will project our own insecurities upon the people around us. And that's, I think especially now with social media, with comparisons and people seeing things all the time on, oh, BuzzFeed article, click this, and you will know the perfect keys to a relationship. Or if this person doesn't have this, they are not the good person. You have those BuzzFeed friends that are just like, oh, checklist, this person's not doing all those things, you probably should stay away from them. And it's, I think also when you are used to a certain lifestyle with your friends or the people that you hang around with, when someone that's brand new comes into that group and disrupts that pattern, people see that as a threat as well. And that's also a sense of insecurity too as well, because people like to have their consistency. And when things get changed up or, life could change, because eventually we all have to grow up, or we all have to, what are we willing to do for love? When real life adult decisions start happening, you're in a relationship with someone and they're like, hey, I'm thinking about moving. A lot of friends are like, oh, don't you move for that person. That person's not worth it. And you're like, but it's different when you're actually in love or you feel like you found that person. So do you believe that people should take their friends' advice into consideration, or do you think that they should kind of go with what their gut tells you, or do you think it should be a balance of both?
Well, one little point of clarity too, I think, and I love that question, is remember one thing: don't ever tell your friends something bad about the person you're dating, because it's going to be with them forever. Okay, so just remember that.
They could come back.
It'll come back because they will remind you of this. Okay, so when you do get head over heels, or you're talking about moving, and they go, "But I remember you said something about him cheating on you." Okay, or wasn't he hooking up with somebody, or wasn't she hooking, whatever. They're going to remember that, and they're going to play on that. Not that they're doing that because they hurt you or they don't love you. It's because they do love you, but you remember what you tell your friends is with your friends, and they're going to remind you of that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a point of clarity. But when it does come to your friends, I think you can take things at face value, but I think you have to look toward your gut, and you have to be centered enough to hear your gut and to know what it's saying. I mean, you can't be all over the place, and you got to know your value as well. Because remember, a relationship are two whole people coming together to make two whole people. I think that's where we've lost the thought process, is that two halves make a whole. If I hear that one more time, I'm going to throw up.
Good.
Okay?
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, because what happens in that situation is you have nothing. You have two codependent people that can't get it together. One person's over there like, they just don't call enough. They're not around enough. They're not here. And the other person's like, I'm being smothered. I can't breathe.
Yeah.
I can't breathe. Okay? And so you have the whole crazy codependency. And then everybody goes, well, I don't know why the relationship didn't work. Well, it's because two whole people have to come together. And that's another thing when you talk about moving.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Great question, but it's like sometimes you really got to think about it, because you need to be just as established as that other person too,
Yeah.
so that it's not like you're out there in the middle of nowhere. And I've heard clients tell me about it. I moved out to Alaska for a guy. I moved to California, moved to Los Angeles for this guy. Whatever. And now I'm out here. I know nobody.
Entrapment.
And I feel like I'm so codependent. I feel like I'm entrapped. I feel like I got nothing. I feel and that's the thing, is you really got to think about those things before you make those big moves. Not that it might not be the right thing to do, but really focus on your gut and don't even worry about what the outside world's telling you, because in the end, you got to look yourself up in the mirror every day.
Yeah.
You're the one in the relationship.
True. And I think as someone I've had my own experience with friends in those things. Okay. I've had experience with friends too as well, where, I wouldn't say I'm the sage of my friend group, but I would say that I'm kind of like the communication buffer where people like try to bounce ideas off of, and they will come with some of those things. And in youth, when I was younger, I'd probably be the first person to just like be like, no, don't do that, and that's a bad idea, or yeah, break up with him or her or whatever. And they would stay with that person. And I always tell people, I was like, you're only as sick as your secrets. Once you start putting that kind of energy about your relationship, and you start including your friends in the situation, they have to sometimes carry the burden of your secrets. So if you have something that you're like, I'm tired of my partner, or my partner does this, and I'm thinking about this, and now they have to face that person, and you're still in that relationship, now they're carrying the burden of some of the problems that you're having in your relationship. I think we've all been there where our friends have told us like stuff in confidence, and then you're like, okay, it's gonna probably, it's either because of stress, or it could be that they just want to put it out there, but then you're wanting the best for them, but at the same time, you're trying to figure out the boundaries. So I've actually, in some cases, lost friends over like putting like my opinion out there, and then they're just like, because then they feel some type of way after they've come and confided in you. Tell them like, maybe it's best that you do kind of figure something else out, and they choose to be with that person, and they feel like now you're sending them bad energy, and you're only wanting what's best for them. So I feel like you have to figure out a balance of having the pace of being honest with your friends, but at the same time, kind of letting them figure it out on their own.
Well, there's certain things I don't want to know as a friend. I mean, I love being a friend, but there's certain things, please don't open up too much. I have had people open up randomly, and I know everybody in here has had that. And you did not expect that night.
They start crying on you in a bar and stuff.
Oh my God, like you had a few drinks, you're having fun, right? You're having fun, everybody's having a good time, and all of a sudden they go, I gotta tell you something.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh God, okay.
Like, shit.
And then they tell you, and it's like they threw like a building on top of you, and they're like, man, I hated to vomit on you, but I just had to tell you. And they're crying. Mm. And they're the ones that don't call you back. Those are the ones that you can't get in touch with. They ghost you. They don't want anything to do with you anymore. And so those are the people I don't want to hear. You're like, I love my friends, but don't go there. I mean, if you're going to divulge something, just divulge it, and just know that I'm going to carry it with me to the grave. But I think you really got to think about, what do you really want to tell your friends? Because your friends care about you. But you're right. If you say something like, if your friend tells you something, and you say, hey, I don't think this person's good for you, or I don't think this person has the right, they're going to make the right choices for you, and then they get back with them, they feel like they're not doing you right. And so they start like kind of ignoring you or ghosting you or just kind of avoiding
you. Yeah.
Because
they don't want that judgment on them.
Exactly.
So it's crazy that we kind of will put that burden on the people that we care for, but then retract or kind of sacrifice them in order for us to keep the facade. Because we all have those people that we know that will get on social media and that will say, I've never been in love like this before ever in my life. This is the love of my life. And you're like, but you were like, this was Scott or Susie like 2 weeks ago, and then you had that person like a month ago, and there was somebody else before that a month before that. there are some people out there that I know that are kind of petty, that will screenshot those kind of conversations and send it to them and remind them, like, whenever they're like, oh, it's over. Well, yeah, because you keep posting this stuff all the time. So, talking about that, why do you think people compare their relationships to one another on social media? So, I call it the purge season. One friend goes single, the whole tribe starts going single. People start dropping their relationship, or when one person gets booed up, like Elma, they get booed up, like LMA, they all like, I need to find a man, I need to find a girlfriend, I need to find a partner. And it's like everybody's running to the water or running to the well to go find someone because one person is either single or now this person is. So why do you think people compare themselves so much to, or they say goals, like relationship goals, life goals, house goals, stuff like that?
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm a therapist, but I still compare myself to other people. Okay, there's not one person on this planet, even though you'll put some stuff out on Facebook saying, comparison, is the stealer of our joy. Steals our joy. It robs our, that's the word, stealer. That's a good word. It robs our joy, right? And how many of us compare ourselves to everybody else? How many of us compare our relationships, our girlfriends, boyfriends, people we want to date, people, whatever. Our whole life is compared. I mean, I've had clients that literally I had to work with them to stop looking at Instagram for 4 hours a night. Starting at 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning, comparing their relationships to other people. Or for example, their friend was getting engaged. And the depression that this would cause clients to look at the engagement pictures, and then you have the pictures of the rings, and then you have the pictures of the places where he might get married. It's a destination wedding.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh my God. And then they look at the destination wedding. And then it's 4 a.m. in the morning, and they have 4 hours before, and unbelievable, and they're like, have to go to work. And then they're thinking about the depression and the anxiety from that. And how many of us have compared ourselves to other people's marriages, other people's relationships? You look at social media and they're having such a great time. And it's like, well, what's up with my life? But I mean, really, I think our whole life in this whole universe is based on what? It's based on comparison. I mean, that's what this whole world seems to be about, right? I mean, who's got better stuff? Who's got a nicer car? Who's got a better job? Whose jacket's nicer? Whose relationship's better? Whose boyfriend's hotter? Whose girlfriend's hotter? And think about it. Who might be nicer? Who could be a better cook? All those questions. Yeah. And then people wonder, is my relationship normal? Or is this like their relationship? And everybody's wanting to know. And I think that's the biggest problem that we have. And I do it. I compare my whole life, too, sometimes. Or I have to check myself and say, wait a second. I'm not being mindful right now. I'm allowing all this glitz and glam and all this stuff to get into my mindset and to take me off target from what I really, truly value.
Because I think as we get older, as we mature, I think our priorities change and they switch up, and the same things that you liked when you may have been younger are not the same when you get older. So comparisons in relationship, a thing that's not on my list, but I wanted to ask you was, what do you think about people that still carry bachelor and bachelorette habits into their relationship? So say, for example, they've been in a relationship for a year or 2 years, but they still have the mentality of somebody that's single. And I think a lot of people do that now, that causes conflicts. If you've been single for about a year and a half, or you're just an independent person, and now you're in a relationship with somebody, I think a lot of the problems that some people may have may be in relation to the fact that they have a single mindset rather than having, oh, I'm in a relationship with someone now, so I have to kind of either dial back or, respect my partner.
That's a great question. Yeah, I think a lot of us, when you are single, you have a tendency of bringing that into the relationship. But then I think there's differences to it. Is it crazy bachelorette activity? Or is it the fact that you're a free spirit? Or is it the fact that you're an independent person? And I think you have to really gauge the person you're going to get in a relationship with, because they have to have that same value. If they're a very independent person, that really works out. But if that's not the case, you really have to think about that.
Love language, yeah.
Yeah, you got to think, does that work? But I think one of the biggest things is when you are in a relationship, it's a give and take. It's a two-way street. But I think you really got to find someone that's a holistic person, that really is the person that you want to be with, but you got to give and take, and you got to work with somebody to make it happen, because it's a couple thing at that point, and you got to really think, is that something you really want to do in life?
So can former lovers be friends?
Yes. But it takes boundaries. Are you talking about friends with benefits, or are you talking about just friends?
Well, we can go. We can go there if we want to.
Might as well.
Well, it's all. I guess we could, because that. That was another question. Do friends with benefits work? Now, I would say it takes two mature people, two independent people. I feel like it can get complicated depending on if one person feels more about the other person than the other. But honestly, I think it's some people are just insecure. I think you can be friends. I'm not saying that you're like having each other over for dinner and like, you know, inviting each other to weddings. Sometimes it can work that way. I think some people, if it was amicable. Thank you. I wasn't drinking before this, I promise. So tongue twisters happen sometimes. But do you think that they can be friends, though? Is it possible?
Okay, so yes, definitely ex-lovers can be friends, but let's talk about it without benefits and then with benefits.
With benefits, okay.
Okay, so without benefits, you can be friends. Like, you change the whole dynamic of the relationship. You stop having sex. You can have boundaries in a relationship. You've got to have a commonality of why you're friends. You've got to find something else to talk about, something else to do besides sex. So there had to be something predicated on the relationship prior. And then you actually have to make a boundary. I mean, you have to you're not like throwing a grenade out there as a boundary and being like, there's no way we're ever having sex ever again. Get away from me. No, it's not like that. But it's like when the chance happens, when you're wanting to make this all friendship, when the moment happens, you've got to step up to the plate and you've got to have that resilience to not go that direction. And you can actually take a relationship that's been a heavy sex relationship out of that relationship into a friendship relationship, but it has to be a two-way street. Both people have to want to do that, and both people want to have a friendship. Now, friends with benefits. Very interesting scenario. Both people have to know the rules in this relationship. And neither one person can get really addicted to the other person. So in certain relationships, I call them toxic and addictive relationships, right? When we get into those types of relationships, a lot of times what happens is one person becomes quite mysterious, okay? And so one person begins to chase of the other person, right? Because the other person's giving what I call a crumb. So every 2 days, maybe the person sends a text that's a crumb. Maybe it's a little like text messages saying what up or whatever it is. Maybe it's emoji, whatever it is, and the other person's on the hook immediately to respond back. And I think that's when we realize that we've become not only codependent in the relationship, but we become addicted to the relationship like a drug. And I know some people are like, how can you get addicted to a relationship like a drug? Well, it's quite easy. I see clients in my office on a daily basis who literally are racing after that relationship like it's meth or heroin or cocaine, and they can't stop it because they got to get their fix. And that person only sticks around long enough, and all of a sudden they take off, or they ghost, or they leave for a few days, or they're not around. And then the person finds himself in an all-time low, and so the emotional roller coaster. And then when the person texts again or gives them a crumb of validation, they go back up, they're smiling, and then back down again. And I think a lot of us know friends that are in that situation because that's all they talk about. So when you actually see them out, that's all they're talking about is, oh God, John did this, or, you know, this happened yesterday. And then right when that person's texting them, they're literally, their whole face lights up. You know, and everything's different. I gotta go. I'll see you later.
I'll run out that door real quick.
Oh yeah, you're like, wait, you didn't even pay your tab. You know, but okay, I guess I will. And that's what happens, and I think that's something that you have to be aware of. And also, friends with benefits, I haven't seen it work very often because one person usually wants the relationship more than the other person, and so that's the key: is that it's not a well even matched situation oftentimes, and so one person really wants to see that person exclusively, while that other person has no intention of seeing the other person exclusively. Just a thought.
I think people also, going back to the authenticity part, is that they don't want to be upfront and honest about what their expectations are in the situation. They're kind of just going with the flow, but if they only see the person just like, this is just purely sex, you know, or if this is just purely a physical thing for me to kind of get out my kinks or whatever, you know, they're not really clear about that. I think that also causes problems down the road too as well.
I agree.
I think another thing that happens, and I think especially with a lot of people now, is that people want attention, people want to feel validated, as you said. So when you get that text message, you may go through dry spells where no one's messaging you like that, and when you have someone that's giving you that attention, texting you in the morning saying, hey, what's up, and you're like, I'm not really interested in the person, but they're giving me that attention that I'm lacking or I'm needing, or and I feel like that's sometimes the foundation of why some people stay in a relationship, is that they like the security of feeling wanted, even though they may not want that person back.
Oh yeah, I mean, validation, and again, that goes back to what I was talking about earlier. We've got to be able to validate ourselves, because otherwise anybody can come in and show us a little more slow validation, and all of a sudden we're running after them. I mean, I see it often. You have people that are like, successful people, honest people, awesome people that literally they get a text at 12:15 a.m. on a Saturday night, and they get ready and head over there to go hang out. They haven't heard from that person in days. Okay, and it's like they're looking for that validation, but the thing is that how validated do we feel after we go over there? And then, and then you're coming back home and you're feeling like you did the 2 days before or 3 days before when you haven't heard from somebody. You see what I'm saying? And I agree with you. We need to have our intent understood. But I think some people don't want to explain their intent because they don't want to lose the person.
They don't want to mess up their game.
Yeah, they don't want to mess it up. And also some of them don't want to feel like they're vulnerable. So they don't want to put it all out there. Mm-hmm. And then other people probably don't want more. They just want to have, like you were saying, just the sexual, just sex in general, and that's it. And so I think some people don't want to put it out there because they know the other person might want more, and then the other people don't want to put it out there because they're going to look vulnerable and they might look weak.
I think I will say this, as I've personally gotten older, I think I've gotten over the fear of being rejected, because I feel like it's the circle of life. You're going to reject people, people are going to reject you. You're going to reject people, people are going to reject you. So I think it's like a circle all around. So I tell people, the older you get, or wherever you're at in life, I feel like you should get over the fear of rejection, because there's going to come a moment where you're going to reject somebody, and that person that you extended your interest in, they're going to get rejected by somebody else. So it's like, it's just a circle of life. And I think people are sometimes afraid of the act of rejection, so they kind of reserve themselves with putting themselves out there, or they reserve themselves from being as authentic, or reserve themselves from where it could possibly be a good relationship, but they're like withholding themselves. So
I like that. I think though, being rejected could be the best thing in your life.
I've been rejected, and I've felt good about that later on.
You're like, thank God, oh my God, I just dodged a bullet. You know what I mean?
People were trash, man. I'm not even gonna lie, I was young and I was just like trash box. Later on, when I was like, thank God I missed that person, because I saw you 7 days later at the club, and I was like, thank goodness. I was just like, embarrassing me.
But rejection can be a good thing, no can be one of the best things that you ever heard. I used to think that yes was awesome, and then now, when people say no, sometimes okay, good, they said it now, we're done with it. Not just in relationships, with anything, with jobs, with businesses, with anything. When it comes down to it, when somebody says no, at first you're like, ass, son of a bitch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're like, that really hurt, or you feel personal. It feels like a personal attack, and then later on you're like, you know what, this is probably for the good. And now I've realized no is not bad at all. I'm like, oh, you got no? Okay, yeah, cool. Great to talk to you. Have a great day. And in relationships, same way. When you meet somebody and they reject you, walk on.
Sure.
Walk on, because you're saving your own self. Seriously. And by the way, one caveat is everybody on this planet has let one great person go. They've all let one person go at some point.
I have.
Yeah. And it's always. And so you could be the great one that got away, and they'll think about you for years on end. You know what I'm saying? God, I really wish I wouldn't have done that. So you got to think about it that way too. Everybody has to play their role, and everybody has to play their part.
Yep. I always say embrace your dopeness. Embrace your dopeness, because I know from myself, when I've seen people out and they've rejected, and then a few months later you see them out with their new partner, I'm like, oh, that's the person you picked up. I was like, okay. But the thing about it, I definitely go with the idea that if I want you to find someone that, feeds your soul, so if they're making you happy and you're the most joyous you've ever been, I feel like that's a win for you. The part that does kind of tickle me is when I see you having your little petty arguments. I'm just like, well, see, you wouldn't have that with me. No, I'm joking. But what is something out that you believe that we've already talked about a lot of our struggles, but what do you think that everyone has common struggles with that we all share, like in common? Like, bottom line, if I came into a relationship with somebody else, we both are going to be dealing with the same thing. So we should try to understand that we're both dealing with it. Like one thing I learned from another relationship therapist was that everyone lies. Everyone lies. So we reprimand people so quickly. You lied to me, but you lie too. And you might have told a little lie about something here or something there. Like, you may have lied about your income at one point. You may have lied about the fact that, how many partners you had. You may have lied about the fact that that friend that I kind of looked at you sideways was not just a friend at one point. So I think we throw or we project these high expectations on our potential partners, but we're guilty of sometimes doing the same exact thing, where we may characterize or chastise our partner for not working out as much as we do, or not having the best body, or oh, you gain weight. But I'm like, but you aren't sometimes the best looking person yourself in the morning, so it's like those kinds of things. So what are some bottom line struggles that you think we all have in common when it comes to love and relationships and life?
Well, we're all human, and I don't think any of us in this room at this point, at this moment, are superheroes right now. So I want to be a superhero. I pray about it. I meditate about it every day. Okay, so outside of that, everybody has problems. Everybody has issues. Every single one of us have the same issues. It's just in a different package. And it's funny because when you actually get into a relationship, and I was talking about this today with a neighbor of mine, when you actually get into a relationship and things are going, and you got the honeymoon time, and everything's great, and everybody's happy, and everybody's eating and drinking and going out and having all that fun, and then eventually the honeymoon wears off. And people have regular problems and struggles, and so somebody might have a work struggle. You might have a work struggle. I might have a work struggle, right? Then we might have a weight gain situation where we can't lose the weight, we can't diet, we don't want to work out. Maybe there's a struggle with health, back issues, whatever the issues are. Everybody struggles with something, but the interesting dynamic in a relationship is one person's struggling while the other person's usually on top. And when the other person's on top, the other person's struggling. It's a very yin-yang dynamic. This is what this world's all about, is this yin-yang dynamic. I talked about that a little earlier. So we have to understand that we're kind of mirroring one another at different times in our life. So your partner might have a really successful career, and you might be kind of floundering a little bit on your career. And then there'll be a time when that flip-flops. You might be at the top of your game as far as health is concerned, running marathons, Ironman, whatever that is, and your significant other could have trouble getting out of bed because of their back, whatever the deal is. But what the thing is that I think we're all kind of looking at each other through almost like a mirrored lens. Sometimes it might seem like a funhouse mirror. Other times it can look like the bathroom mirror. But the point is that we're both humans in relationship. If it's two people in a relationship, both humans, both people that are dealing with their problems and issues and struggles. And I think when we begin to actually open our own heart and mind up to the other person and actually love ourselves too, we understand the trials and tribulations they're going through. And as a couple, I think you kind of got to walk through it together. And you got to accept one another. You got to be each other's cheerleader. You got to be support staff. But also, they got to be the same way too. You can't just be given everything. And I think sometimes we fall into that trap too. So I really think that, honestly, looking at your life and saying, hey, we're going to go through ups and downs, trials and tribulations. This person's going to too. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. If we can walk through it together and respect each other, and I think that's the cornerstone of a good relationship, is that you respect one another. If you don't have respect, I don't know what you have. You don't have a relationship.
I think it's also understanding your partner's history too as well. I think a lot of people don't take that into consideration, that everybody comes into a relationship with a certain amount of baggage or a certain type of, we're all going to come to a relationship with baggage. And it depends on what level of comfort you're at with that type of baggage. So that brings me to my next point that's more specific. What are some struggles you feel like that are exclusive to the LGBTQ community? I would just say, from an observational standpoint, is that especially people that, depending on the age group that you're in, a lot of people, I'd say of years past, they did not have, I guess, a leg up in terms of dating freely as, say, their heterosexual counterparts. So a lot of their dating, shortcomings or pitfalls and stuff like that, they had to work out either in adulthood or, later on in life, whereas a lot of their heterosexual counterparts may have had to do so like in high school or adolescence and stuff like that. Now you're seeing a little bit of a switch with younger people where some of them in certain areas are getting that same experience. What do you feel like are some struggles that are specific towards like that community at large comparative to, let's say, the heterosexual community?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is self-love. I think that because of the feeling of not being equal and the same, I think because, unfortunately, our society is so behind the times. I mean, I don't... everybody should freely be able to love whoever they want to and marry whoever they want to, right? So... but I think self-love is a big thing, and to be able to identify with oneself and to appreciate oneself and to love oneself. I think that's one of the biggest things. Now, is it independent to the LGBT community? No. I feel that maybe independent in the LGBT, and I don't really think anything can be really independent. So I'm just gonna be honest with you.
Go ahead.
I think that it's all the same. I think we all have the same problems. I think it's just shrouded in a different package. I think that one of the things, though, too, is there hasn't been enough of these conversations to really talk about it and to put it out there and to people feel freely of talking about love and romance and sex and marriage and all these things, because it is new. We finally have marriage open opportunity in the last few years, right? I think, okay, so I have figured out something that's independent to the LGBT community. Okay. What I found, though, is there was so long that this community could not get married and actually marry their partner and have a ceremony and do it. Mm. And I think because of that, I find that some of the relationships that exist were not based truly on the fact that I want you to be in my life forever. Mm. I think some people took the easy way out because they knew that it wasn't, that there was no possibility. Honey, I'm going to marry you right when we get the chance, okay? Mm. I also think, to some degree, there was that unattainability. And so when somebody's not being able to be attained, it's more interesting for the moment. Mm-hmm. And I think that when we finally allowed marriage to be an option for everybody, I think it changed that dynamic, but it changed it in such a overwhelming, significant way that I think it really threw people for a loop, because all of a sudden, for the first time, they can actually get married for real. And give their assets, half their assets, for real, and have a bond that's by the courts and rings and all this stuff and witnesses, and I think that's changed the dynamic. And I think that throughout more and more years to come, I think that there's going to be more of a stable LGBT community, because for the first LGBTQ community, because for the first time you can actually fall in love with somebody, get engaged, and get married, and that's a legitimate thing. And it actually will happen. It's not something we can do it in the future, we will do it. And I think that's what's been holding back several, how many thousands, 100,000 people from actually really fully committing.
But do you also think that the problem is that people sometimes will project the heterosexual narrative upon their relationships? Because everybody's different and every community is different. So it's almost like where you talk about cultural differences too as well, where you see people that may be Muslim, Christian, that they'll project, their different cultural ideologies into, or see other cultural ideologies and try to infuse that in the relationship, and sometimes it doesn't work. Because I've also noticed too as well, and I've heard from somebody like Don Lemon, he quoted the fact that he said that, people say, oh, now that we have, gay marriage available to everyone, and within this country anyway, that, people are now rushing towards the altar. And he's like, well, I don't want people to get confused that, we don't want to project the heterosexual narrative onto the LGBTQ community type situation. Now, everybody has their own different opinions.
Well, I see what you're saying, though.
But I guess what I'm wanting to figure out from you also is that, do you think that, like you said, there really isn't any difference except for the fact that now with marriage, that's kind of made people feel I guess you could say that there's sort of like an equilibrium now, and that we'll soon find out over the next decades that would impact, or it doesn't make a significance. But don't you also think that it's not just about marriage? Do you think it's also about like how someone is raised? Because I feel like even with the whole marriage idea, there's still issues within people's families of accepting people, or even how they see themselves even within the community at large, even within the subcategories of their different tribes. I'm sorry, I don't want to.
No, I understand.
Yeah, within their tribes, that there's also a hierarchy, and there's also this feeling that someone may feel insignificant based on ageism, age, race, looks, appearances, all these different things. So, and those things don't seem to be going away or would be impacted by marriage. And I think that's also something that I feel like other people are dealing with in other groups too as well. So to come back to that, what do you think that would have an impact, I guess you could say specifically, towards that group, and then also projected to other groups at large?
Well, I like the first question you asked me about putting the traditional marriage onto the LGBTQ community, right, and taking those facets from the traditional marriage. Again, it goes back to comparison. I think if you're gonna get married, you got to get married and do it your way. I think you got to be who you are. I don't think you want to try to conform to, I'm the husband, I'm the wife, I'm the whatever. I don't think that heterosexuals have a cornerstone on it. I think that it's about finding love and finding the love that you have and being there with it and taking the next step to solidify that love. Speaking from the fact that you said about upbringing and existence in that way, and how maybe parenting and family dynamic, what it can do. And families can do a horrible, not all families. There's some really amazing families out there that are really open-minded and they love their kids for their kids. But there's some family dynamics that are quite horrible, okay? And they were repressive and angry, and it was all based on you will be like this or you're not good enough. Okay, and so I think that that's also existence in the LGBTQ community as well, because to be raised in a way that you're not good enough, or you can't be this way, or this way is not right, that goes back to the self-esteem, the self-emotional level. I'm not doing something right. And then you start second-guessing and questioning your actual validity of a person. And I think that's what we need to work on and change, because I feel that if people can actually be honest and talk about who they are and what they've come from and how they've had to get to where they are, I think that's a powerful stance. But I do think, quite honestly, it's sad that people are still in the dark ages, but you're still going to have that family dynamic. And we're just talking about the United States here. Think about like India, Asia. Think about like Mexico. Think about the different countries where their whole thought process on LGBTQ is we're not even talking about that right now. Okay, and for somebody to be able to come out and be honest and authentic in their true self, right, is very difficult, even almost impossible in certain family dynamics. And so then to do that, and then to be able to find somebody that not only loves you, not some sort of terrible, toxic, horrible, addictive relationship, and to find someone that actually loves you, that's even harder too. And so I think we have to applaud folks that have actually gotten to that level to say, you know what, I'm going to do what I have to do. I'm going to find the love that I want to find. And I found it within myself first, but I had to let go of the negative, repressive thought process, that negative broken record that was ingrained into my brain that said I wasn't good enough because I was gay, or not good enough because I'm lesbian, or not good enough because of that, and letting that go. And that's something that I really work with people to do, because if you don't let go of that negative broken record, you're never going to be good enough in your own mind and find the love of your life that you want to find.
And I think, just to close out this part, I think a lot of people, regardless of what their sexual preference is, I feel like a lot of people want a wedding, but they are not ready for a marriage. And I see that with a lot, no matter what your background is, no matter where you come from, everybody is ready for that wedding, but they're not ready for the marriage. And so that brings us to the last part before we get to the Q&A. What are pros of dating today compared to generations past? What are some positives about being either single or dating now that maybe 2 generations before they may have not had or appreciated or had the ability to have access to?
Well, I think you have access to meeting all kinds of people. You have access to doing anything you want to do, I think, to some degree. I think that, think about how it was to date like in the 50s. I mean, come on. I
was there.
You were there?
No.
The lifetime beforehand?
Oh, yeah.
A couple lifetimes before.
Yeah.
No, but think about it. Think about how crazy that was. And the whole, going to the sock hop and stuff. I mean, come on. But I think you have so many options now where you can actually go to places. You have experiences. And you can have experiences with other people. It's not about buying a bunch of alcohol. I mean, yeah, you can buy a couple bottles of rosé, have some fun, whatever you want to do. However, I think, though, that you can actually have experiences with people that you never had the opportunity to do before. And I think for the first time, we as individuals can be who we want to be more so than ever before. And I think that you can find other people that are like in your tribe. And I think that's awesome. And that's where I think we are right now. Are we perfect? No. But have we come a long way? Yes.
Awesome. So now we're going to open up to Q&A. Does anybody have any questions or want any type of... Yes, ma'am?
So I have a question that kind of goes back to some of the stuff that you guys talked about with friends giving advice or input in on relationships. I found a lot with some of my friends, my female friends in particular, when they meet a guy, especially with social media these days, they create what I call the imaginary man. The man in the mirror that doesn't really exist, and they have this picture that even when they start acting uncharacteristically of who this person that they've created in their head, they still make excuses and compromises for the kind of person that they're looking for. So, from personal experience, Thomas, and maybe some professional experience that you may have, how do you combat that with bringing your friend back to reality of they're acting uncharacteristically of this person you've created? Like, that's not who they are. How do you find that balance without pushing them away by being like, they suck, why can't you see it? So
You want to take it?
Yeah, I think when we love to create, I call it fantasia, and I feel like a lot of people, especially now with going back to the fact of comparisons and TV and media and all these things that are available to us that we're seeing right now, we project that. So when we see this person is showing us the niceties of who they are, the positives of who they are, and then you're so desperately looking to find the one per se, and so you're wanting to invest so much into it. It's almost like, not to say fool's gold, but you're seeing all these positives, and you're seeing your friends find the one, and you're seeing BuzzFeed, and then you're watching MTV, or you're watching, all these different TV shows that they're like, I have never found the one ever like this before in my life. Or you watch the Love Actually memes that sat there and said, you've always been the one. I think we take all those into this stew, and we build this, and we so desperately sometimes want that person to work out that we will sometimes just forego some of the things that we normally would check ourselves with. I think we make the mistake sometimes, even with love, that they say love will lead you blind sometimes, and sometimes you have to take a step back real quick and be like, wait, hold up, pause, because if I wasn't looking for this person romantically, would I be ignoring some of these things that they're having? Like, when you're meeting someone that's a friend or going into business or something else like that, we sometimes acknowledge those shortcomings or we pay attention to those. But when it's like love or romance, you're taking all this cocktail of stuff and you're wanting it to work out so bad that we will sometimes just be like, oh, it's okay. But I feel like people will always show you who they really are. Eventually it will. And I think if you really are paying attention, they do show you who they are. You just have to choose to either acknowledge it or figure it out down the road. But people will eventually show you who they are.
My take, I like your take on that. My take, too, is that we have a tendency of dating our past. Whether it's our mom or dad, no matter how narcissistic, no matter what the traits were, no matter how cluster B blaring it was with the neon sign, when we meet somebody, we normally have a tendency of not want to see anything wrong, but what might be wrong glaring to the outside world, to us is very normal, because it could be just like dad or just like mom. And so I think that's what happens a lot of times, is until we get right with ourselves and really figure out who we are, we don't really see the patterns. And so we don't understand. So if somebody had like a narcissistic father, and then they're out there trying to meet a guy that they like, and then this person, is like really interesting and fun and cool and this great dynamic, but eventually, you put them on that pedestal, but eventually they're not around, or they're telling you what to do, or they're being aggressive, whatever the deal is. You want to forgo that because you did that when you were a kid as well. Because you had to walk on those eggshells to get the love that you wanted from your mom or dad or whatever. And so I think that's what happens a lot of times, is that we want to gloss over that, but we really don't even know that we're glossing over it because it's so normal. It's our normal. Is it our healthy thing? No. But is it normal? Yes. And I think that might be a lot of times what happens. And so from the outside world, we look at it and we go, this is crazy. You're crazy. I mean, this person's horrible. Don't you see it? But they're like, no, they're great. I mean, they're great. But they see it because it reminds them of a commonplace and usually a parent dynamic.
And we love based on our experience of love. I've said that a lot too as well. We love based on our experience of love. So some people, they may have grown up in a home that everybody said, I love you all the time. They hug, they show affection. And some people's love is ball busting. Like I grew up in a house where everybody busts each other's balls. So that's how I sometimes will show my type of affection. But some people, they're very nurturing. And that goes back to love language. So, you may see, like she said, you may see things differently than that person, but that's based on their experience of love and what they have seen and what they're used to and what they're accommodated to. So the fantasy of where we're at currently right now is I think everyone is kind of trying to build their perfect life, their fantasy, their goals, and we're willing to sometimes compromise that idea to reach that, which sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Can you talk about some of the things that you do to foster that kind of, when you're in a group with someone, it's like you have your own communication. The positive things you do just to reinforce that communication and make it like the Oasis communication. You know? You know what I'm saying? I know you've talked about that before. It's like, it's uplifting to know that just to be thinking about someone at the same time, no drama with it. It's just, it's positive things. Hope that went well for you today, or I mean, I've heard you talk about those things before. It's good to remember.
Yeah, I love that question, and thanks for bringing that up. I think that's a really great thing. Yeah, so I think a lot of times when we get into a relationship, we get scared of looking like we're too into the relationship. And we don't really put it out there. Like in the beginning when you were like so happy, or hey, you text and you say, hey, I just want to hope you're having a great day, or hope things are going on good at work, or maybe you take a quick time to make a phone call. Really, a lot of times we actually spend more time hanging out with our friends and making them feel better than the person that we're dating. And one of the things that I like to tell a lot of my clients is step back and look at that person, because a lot of times we start analyzing the text. Well, what do they mean by that text? I don't know what they meant by that text. And that message was so short. What do they mean by that message? And you start literally picking apart piece by piece by piece by piece, right? And what leaves you there is you start questioning, well, should I respond? Should I not respond? Should I wait 10 minutes? Should I wait till tomorrow? Respond to this person. Take the whole BS out of it. Look at it like a scientific experiment and step back and say, how would you treat your best friend? How would you treat your best friend? And if you would sit there and call your best friend and say, hey, if you would have sent a text message and say, hey, I hope you're having a great day, do the same thing for the person that you're dating. Do the same thing for the person you're in the relationship with. I think a lot of times we back off, but that's the worst thing we can do. Now, if they come back and they're an asshole about it, or they do something, whatever, now you know for a fact that this person isn't probably worth, or they have some toxic issues that they got to deal with. Okay, or maybe they're just not ready to be in a relationship like that because they haven't figured out who they are. But for the most part, I think you're going to bring back that whole oasis of that really like, hey, this person really cares about me, and they're going to realize that they're safe in the environment to contribute back the same way, because it has to be a safe place to be. I mean, it's got to be the treehouse of trust. If we're not in the treehouse of trust, and I don't feel like I'm in the treehouse, I'm not going to send you nice, loving messages. But if you're sending them to me, even if I'm somebody that feels like I'm scared to do it, I'm going to eventually feel like I can open up and stop having that barrier and that wall. And I'm going to say, hey, this person actually cares about me. I'm going to put it out there too. Let's see what happens. And I think that's when you have two people working on the same level that actually care about one another. And neither one cares about how the other person looks, and they don't care how they look. They're just showing that they care.
I think also consistency is important. I feel like the more consistent you are in life, the more things will, work out in that towards that favor. So people sometimes will switch up the game. They'll, like she said, you'll be really cool with your best friend, but then you get into a relationship with somebody, you start trying to put on the face work, as they say. And I feel like if it is your best friend and you are the type of person to message your best friend back extremely, quickly, and you're honest with them, treat that same way with your relationships. I think, nobody wants synthetic people. People want authentic people. I always say synthetic people will not get you far in life. And the more honest you are, especially when you meet someone and you're treating your friends, with respect, or you're engaging them a certain way, and you engage everybody the same way, I think when someone is meeting you, they see that, okay, this person's consistent, this person's not a wishy-washy person. They don't go from one group to another, switching up or playing face work. Does that make sense? So I feel like when it comes to communication, I feel like be consistent across all platforms. I feel like the biggest problem that people will ever have, the biggest problem people will have, and somebody please let me know about time, where we're at with time and everything. But when it comes to a group, I always love with this, is that if you get a group of people into a room that all know you, and they are doing poll questions about you, and everybody's answering differently about you, that's a problem. Especially people that have spent so much time with you. So if they sit there and say, oh, what would Josh do in this situation? Everybody's like, oh, he would do this, he would do this, he would do this, he would do this. Then that's a problem. Because for some reason, either you're not communicating clearly to that group of people, or you've not been consistent with that group of people. Does that make sense? I feel like if your partner in love and your friends in life are not on the same page about you, that's also another problem. And it goes back to communication and establishing clear communication and being authentic and honest with each other.
I totally agree with you. What I was getting at too, and you just made that point, is when you're in that groove and you have that communication, your friends fall by the wayside. Mm-hmm. That's usually a good thing.
Sometimes they fall by the wayside, and sometimes they can be drawn in closer. I mean,
right,
yeah.
But still, it's an unbreakable bond.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I'm curious on your standpoint, your opinion on large age differences in a relationship. I guess more specifically to myself, like we have a 9-year age difference. And from, I'm used to, as a woman, always dating a little bit older than myself. And we're looking at a 9-year age difference. So what is your advice for such a large age gap in like communicating and just, I guess, living life? Because I know sometimes I see things that he might be going through that I'm like, oh, been there, done that. But I also don't want to come off like pretentious or like, well, I know it all, so let me give you the answer. Like, how do you let them live their life and figure it out, but still keep that cohesion in a relationship?
Well, 9 is actually the magic number, so that's interesting you brought that up. There's been studies done on 9 years difference being the best combination.
Interesting.
Straight up. 9 years is a good enough time where you have a lot of things in common. It's not like, it's 30 years or like, what, who, Jimi Hendrix, what? It's really like you actually have things in common, but there's a little bit of distinct where you're not going through the same things at the same time. You see what I'm saying? So the growing up phase is in different levels. Now, one person's going to hit a certain level before the other person, right? And that's good, bad, and different. But I think that we learn from if we're in a good, positive relationship, we'll learn from the other person. So I think a 9-year difference is perfect. I think, though, when you start going up toward when we're at the 20-year mark, I think 15 to my deal is 17 up. It's too much of a difference, and the reason for it, not all the time, it depends. So if somebody's like 85 and we're talking, I mean, it has to be a certain demographic we're talking about. But like the 18-year-old and the 50-year-old's normally not going to work. Not a good idea. But I think that 9 is perfect. What I think, though, is that you have to love each other for who they are. You have to love him. You have to love her. That's just the way it is. And if you love each other, does the age really matter? Now, if he was or you were geriatric, this could be a different story. And I'm not making fun of older folks at all. But I'm saying it wouldn't work, okay? Because what would you really have in common? But I think one of the biggest things is that when you do have that little bit of a gap, there's certain things that you know that you don't know, and and it's so cool because you can actually talk about stuff. Like when I was growing up, my husband and I are actually 9 years apart. So we talk about stuff that I didn't know, like about him on stuff. Like he watched some TV shows that are pretty funny, and we have this cool thing. But we're so close in that age that it really just works. And I also feel that it complements one another because I feel like I watched my parents. So let's take personal. I can talk as a therapist all I want, but I mean being personal. My mom and my dad, when they got married, they were a year apart. And they were going through the struggles of getting out of college and doing all this thing. And I feel that my dad really didn't get to the age of really being a man until basically my parents were getting divorced. And I look back at those times and I realize that both of my parents were children when they got married. And I think being kids and not being able to experience life and going through it is a detriment. Before you get, and I think you just have to learn and really grow together. And I think that if you can do that, that's powerful because that actually sets you up for a powerful relationship that has strong bonds. And I also feel too that if you have some years under your belt, you've dated, maybe you've been engaged before, and you've actually experienced that, you know that you're not missing anything. I think a lot of people get into relationships really early on in their early 20s, and then they get married or they get really in the relationship, and they feel like they've lost their youth. Because to some degree, I think we all need to experience dating and going out and meeting different people and having those experiences. Because without it, we can't sit there and say that we actually did have those experiences. Because I think that's what makes us who we are. And that's what makes us so special. Even though a lot of times you look at those situations and say, God, I can't believe that. But those are the things that made you who you are. And I think it's powerful.
I think also it's being secure in yourself, where you're at in the relationship and seeing where you're at with your partner too as well. I think a lot of people, when you're talking about age differences, there can be, you have to respect where your partner is too in life. And I think sometimes we project, oh, you may talk down to the person if you're the older person in the relationship. You may be like, oh, well, you're still young, you don't understand anything yet. Or you'll be like, oh, this is a part of life. And your partner will be like, well, I'm supposed to be equal. You're not my parent. I'm supposed to be an equal to you in this relationship. And there may be some times where you feel like, well, this person, because I'm on the older side, I can't maybe keep up in certain areas of life. And I feel like you guys should understand your relationship better than anyone else, but understand each other's boundaries, but also understand where you're secure at too as well. You have to really be secure to be in a relationship like that on both ends. You have to know where you are if you're the younger person, and you have to understand where you're at as the older person and respect each other from both ends. Because sometimes you will have to check yourself, be like, oh wait, no, they didn't mean it like that. They didn't mean it like that. And when you are also dating a relationship, you're talking about two worlds colliding. Because if you're the older person, when you're the older person in the relationship, you have older friends. And when you're the younger person, you have younger friends. And sometimes those worlds will collide. And you will see or have different conversations occurring, thank you, at the same time. So it's really being secure because you're also dealing with that kind of cocktail too as well. So it comes back to being secure and respecting each other's boundaries. Okay? Do we have any more questions before we wrap up? No? None? Are you sure? Wow, it's silence. Feels like that talent show back in kindergarten, back in 19. Yes.
I'll ask. How do you set up boundaries in a relationship? Like, how do you come to the relationship and say, okay, here are my boundaries, without it being taken as like a personal attack on you or the other person?
I feel like it depends on this. Well, one, you have to, when you're having these discussions, it's all about the theater that you're having these discussions in. You don't want to have these discussions when it's like hostile.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying? When you're both like not in a space to discuss. So if you're talking about it as a precursor, or are you talking about it like after somebody's disrespected that space?
I guess in both. Like, how do you? I think for myself, I think it's very easy to say, I like this, I don't like this, I like this, I don't like this. It's very easy for me. But for some people, it's very difficult to say what they like and they don't like without it being taken the wrong way. So I don't know. I think boundaries is always something that comes up in a lot of relationship conversations, but people don't know how to actually set them fairly, because they might say, well, I don't like this, but then they bend the rules a little bit, or something along that line.
Well, for me, I will say this, is that you have to pick your battles in a relationship, because you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. You can't go into it and say every single thing that bothers me, I have to address. Sometimes in a relationship there's growth, and you have to, and there's going to be things that irritates your partner about you that they're going to have to get over, and you have to figure out that balance of, you know, things that you are like hard line, like, okay, this is something that I really will not, you know, this is not something that I would appreciate you crossing over, but there's some things that you kind of have to let go. Does that make sense? That you have to acknowledge. And I think those kind of conversations can fluctuate throughout the relationship. I think if it's something that happens continuously and you know it's a serious situation, I feel like don't pick that immediate time when people aren't willing to listen to address those. I think when you take it out of the theater and it's something like you're like, okay, hey, just to kind of let you know, like a few days ago you kind of did this, I'm not really a fan of that. You know, that's just who I am, you know, and that also opens it up to dialogue if they want to discuss some things with you too as well. I think, but we have to also be humble about that too, of where just like you're giving feedback, they can give you feedback too. And you have to be able to take criticism as well when you're giving it out. I think you may have something to add too as well with that.
Just one sentence.
Yeah.
Just one thing. Once you do create it, don't waver. Don't waver. Don't go back and forth, because that confuses somebody. And also, it's like, well, why should I respect that? You didn't do it last 3 times. And I don't think you should throw out a live grenade before somebody does something. You know, I think that you have to wait till it is prompted, right? Prompted. Let somebody bring it up and then say, yeah, that's not going to work for me or whatever. But being forthright and do the right thing, but be consistent. Consistency is key when it comes to boundaries. Otherwise, disrespect and people will walk all over your boundaries.
Well, that's it, guys. We want to thank you for coming to our first lecture. Thank you, Ashley, so much. We will probably continue the conversation in the future, too, as well. Our next lecture will be over entrepreneurship, and we'll have some pretty cool people coming in to discuss that, too, as well. Hopefully, you guys gain some information. Feel free to keep the conversation going. Feel free to tell friends about it. We are always looking for feedback, so if you guys have any type of extra questions you want to ask, feel free. We have Ashley's communication available on our Facebook group, our Instagram too as well, myself included, Gage as well. So if you have any questions about Humanity 101, or if you have any personal questions you want to ask her afterwards, you're welcome to. And I want to thank you guys so much for being a part of this. And this means a lot to me and Gage, and also to Ashley as being our first guest. I want to thank you so much. And hopefully, again, like we said, come back and see us, okay? Thank you.